Hi, I'm Paul Karasik, and I'm the editor of this book, Fletcher Hanks, I Shall Destroy All the Civilized Planets, a book that's done very well at SPX and other conventions, much to my shock, wonderment, surprise, and joy.
Now, Paul, Fletcher Hanks is, he's almost a footnote to the comic industry. At this point, nobody really knows who he is. Where did you find him?
Well, Fletcher Hanks, I was the associate editor of Raw magazine, and we reprinted one of these Fletcher Hanks stories 25 years ago. Subsequently, I'd forgotten completely about him, but then somebody sent me a link to a story on the internet, and bit by bit, I found out more stories, and I also found out the story of this mysterious cartoonist who worked for the first 3 years of the comics and then disappeared. So this book is 15 of the best Fletcher Hanks stories. Just to give you a little taste, let's find some really, really good Fletcher Hanks panel. Here, there we go. That panel's really good. Yeah, just underneath that. And then I found out what happened to this guy. So at the end of the book is a story that I wrote and drew that explains what happened to Fletcher Hanks. I met his son and got the story.
Now, what makes Fletcher Hanks unique amongst the comic creators?
Well, in terms of the comic book, he's one of the few cartoonists who was an auteur. That is, he wrote, penciled, inked, lettered, and I think colored his work. Early on in the comic book industry, they realized that the only way they were going to fill 52 pages is if they treated them like cars and gave them the Henry Ford production line and had one guy writing and one guy penciling, one guy inking. Well, this does not make for very interesting comics. Fletcher Hanks was there right at the beginning, and he was the first guy to do all of these things at once. Subsequently, there have been a handful of great cartoonists, very familiar to comics fans, who did all of those things, was a true auteur. The exciting thing about Fletcher Hanks for readers of comics is that no one has really heard of this guy until very recently when we put this book together.
Now, you had previously worked for Raw, and tell us a little bit about your history within the comic industry.
Well, I worked with Raw because I met Art Spiegelman taking his class, comics language of the comics class at the School of Visual Arts, and subsequently after Raw, I've only worked on a few projects. My body of work is very small. I almost feel odd calling myself a cartoonist because my bookshelf is pretty meager. I worked with David Mazzucchelli in adapting Paul Auster's novel City of Glass into a graphic novel. I did a book with my sister called The Ride Together that's part comics, part prose about growing up with our oldest brother who is autistic. I co-edited the Masters of Comic Art catalog that went with the show, first major museum retrospective of comics a few years ago, and a couple of other things. I do gag cartoons. I've had work in the New Yorker and work in Nickelodeon, and so my career is not very straightforward. It's sort of all over the place.
So I'm just curious, because this book has done so well, it's sold out the first printing, and I know it's doing well here. It's got a lot of great mainstream press that maybe not normally would cover comics. What do you think about Fletcher's work that has connected sort of on a grander scale then?
Well, I think it's got appeal to people who are looking for oddball comics, which is a lot of the SPX audience, the independent readers, but also for people who read mainstream comics. This is by far the weirdest superhero stuff on the planet that's ever was done. The next audience that I'm hope will see this book and react to it are people who are unfamiliar with comics, people who will read these 15 stories and wonder, after reading them, who the heck is this guy? And then get to my story and find out who he is. And it really becomes another story, a sort of a father and son, a story with more resonance.